Jacques-Louis David was the greatest neoclassical painter of the 18th century. In this self-portrait, we see how intensely he examined the world. He is poised to use his painter's tools, the palette and brush, as if they were weapons of political propaganda, which they were. David's art seemed to ride each wave of political change in the stormy years of the French Revolution. In 1785, he was the star of the Salon for The Oath of the Horatii. Its neoclassical style expressed discipline, commitment, and moral authority. It expressed those in the style itself. The firm drawing taut heroic bodies, theatrically eloquent gestures, and clear rational spaces make the moral message of the painting crystal clear, showing us exactly who the heroes are. Oath of the Horatii was painted as a royal commission. It served the monarchical French state. Yet by the time revolution broke out, it seemed to people a symbol of the desire for a republican government. In 1787, David's painting The Death of Socrates seemed to foreshadow the coming revolution by portraying a hero who resists unjust authority. We see the great Greek philosopher reaching out for the hemlock that he will drink to kill himself rather than to renounce his beliefs. The severity of David's style matches the unbending will of the political dissident. When the revolution arrived in 1789, David joined in the political fray. He worked to apply his academic skills as a painter to the challenge of representing the new political system. He planned a massive painting depicting the turning point of revolution, the oath of the tennis court. His classical style required him to draw hundreds of individual studies of bodies and faces to build the complex composition. But the events set in motion by the revolution moved too fast. The painting was never finished. By 1793, some of the figures in David's painting would be executed by guillotine, as Robespierre led the Reign of Terror. David himself joined Robespierre's political faction, and in 1793, David voted for King Louis XVI to be executed by guillotine. David's iconic Death of Marat from 1793 shows us the painter at the peak of his involvement in the revolutionary cause. It powerfully mythologizes a political hero. David uses the stark clarity of neoclassical style to make Marat seem a Christ-like martyr bathed in sacred light. The painting leaves no question that we are to admire Marat and grieve for him. When the Reign of Terror ended, David was put on trial for his vote to execute Louis XVI. He could have been sentenced to execution himself. Instead, he was sent to prison in relatively comfortable conditions. He made this self-portrait during his imprisonment. It reads like an oath. David is swearing to be a painter and leave politics alone. But he didn't do that. David regained his reputation, first doing portraits and then with this massive painting, The Intervention of the Sabine Women. It's about 13 feet high by 17 feet wide, a massive history painting that depicts the women of ancient Rome intervening to stop masculine violence, demanding an end to civil war. Painted in 1799, it hit the right political tone for a country weary of bloodshed. 1799 was also the year that a brilliant military strategist named Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup d'etat. Having already established himself as a hero for leading numerous French military victories. Craving order and stability, the people of France swooned over Napoleon. The cult of personality that he inspired led him to assume absolute political control. David became the premier painter of Napoleon's political image. His equestrian portrait is a masterclass in how to use academic neoclassical style to create an aura of unquestionable heroism, command, legitimacy to rule. Napoleon sits calmly on a rearing horse, his hand gesturing forward into the future. David mythologizes Napoleon, making him a demigod, fearless, unshakable. In reality, Napoleon crossed the Alps riding on a mule, as shown in this painting by Paul Delaroche. The slow, plodding journey across a mountain range shown here did not make Napoleon seem larger than life, the way David's rearing horse and commanding body of Napoleon does. The dynamism of David's painting gives us a sense of a climactic moment, making us believe Napoleon can handle anything. By 1804, David, who had once envisioned heroic revolution so forcefully, who had honored Marat as a fallen hero of the Republic, was now painting Napoleon being crowned emperor. The dream of the revolution had failed. French politics was sliding back toward monarchy. And with that failure, the next generation of French history painters would turn to Romanticism, which undercut the neoclassicism of David or abandoned it altogether. Artists like Gericault create paintings that are murky, both morally and psychologically, as well as formally. Instead of impressing us with commanding heroes, Gericault paints soldiers losing control, stumbling in the agony of death, lost on a raft. He paints defeat, death, despair. His vision of history confronts the viewer with moral ambiguity, imparting anxiety instead of uplift, and revealing heroism to be a questionable concept. He also calls into question the belief in history as progress. In 1812, Gericault presented at the Salon a strangely subversive equestrian portrait. These had almost always been reserved for famous military conquerors, but Gericault paints an anonymous soldier losing control of his horse. Instead of clarity, harmony, we see flailing limbs moving in opposing directions. The horse goes forward, the soldier turns back. Action is at war with itself. Gericault inverted the idea of heroic command again in 1815 with this painting, a wounded soldier who has dismounted and slunk away from the battlefield, presumably to meet his end. Notice the downward tilt of the ground and the dark storm clouds gathering. Gericault is painting defeat at a time when Napoleon had just been defeated after his foolhardy attempt to conquer Russia. The Bourbon monarchy was restored in 1815 with Louis XVIII restored to the throne. The gains of the revolution were gone. All that trauma, bloodshed, that desperate desire for change, for a government of equality, was it all for nothing? These questions are latent in Gericault's most disturbing anti-heroic painting of all, the Raft of the Medusa. Survivors of a shipwreck cling desperately to a makeshift raft, the dead mixed in with the living, some having resorted to cannibalism. Its sense of horror and despair are like nothing David ever painted. There is no clear moral uplift, no heroism, no sense of triumph.